17. O'Donnell looked up, somber. I was going to inquire as to the meaning of all those rude and abusive messages on my answering machine. Then he raised the autopsy report, an explanatory gesture. But now I understand. Neagley asked, how did you get in here? O'Donnell just said, oh, please. Where the hell were you? Reacher asked. I was in New Jersey, O'Donnell said. My sister was sick. How sick? Very sick. Did she die? No, she recovered. Then you should have been here days ago. Thanks for your concern. We were worried, Neagley said. We thought they got you, too. O'Donnell nodded. You should be worried. You should stay worried. It's a worrying situation. I had to wait 4 hours for a flight. I used the time making calls. No answer from Franz, obviously. Now I know why, of course. No answer from Swan or Dixon or Orozco or Sanchez, either. My conclusion was that one of them had gotten all the others together and they had run into a problem. Not you or Reacher, because you're too busy in Chicago and who the hell could ever find Reacher? And not me, because I was temporarily off the grid in New Jersey. I wasn't too busy, Neagley said. How could anyone think that? I'd have dropped everything and come running. O'Donnell nodded again. At first that was the only thing that gave me hope. I figured they would have called you. So why didn't they? Don't they like me? If they hated you they'd still have called you. Without you it would have been like fighting with one hand behind their backs. Who would do that voluntarily? But in the end it's perception that counts, not reality. You're very high grade now compared to the rest of us. I think they might have hesitated with you. Maybe until it was too late. So what are you saying? I'm saying that one of them, and now I see that it would have been Franz, was in trouble, and he called all of us that he perceived as readily available. Which excluded you and Reacher by definition, and me also, by bad luck, because I wasn't where I normally am. That's how we saw it, too. Except you're a bonus. Your sister being sick was a stroke of luck for us. And for you, maybe. But not for her. Stop whining, Reacher said. She's alive, isn't she? Nice to see you, too, O'Donnell said. After all these years. How did you get in here? Neagley asked. O'Donnell shifted in his seat and took a switchblade from one coat pocket and a set of brass knuckles from the other. A guy who can get these through airport security can get into a hotel room, believe me. How did you get those through an airport? My secret, O'Donnell said. Ceramic, Reacher said. They don't make them anymore. Because they don't set the metal detector off. Correct, O'Donnell said. No metal at all. Apart from the switchblade spring, which is still steel. But that's very small. It's good to see you again, David, Reacher said. Likewise. But I wish it were under happier circumstances. The circumstances just got 50% happier. We thought it was just the two of us. Now it's the three of us. What have we got? Very little. You've seen what's in his autopsy report. Apart from that, we've got two generic white men who tossed his office. Didn't find anything. Because he was mailing stuff to himself in a permanent loop. We found his mailbox and picked up 4 flash memories and we're down to the last try at a password. So start thinking about computer security, Neagley said. O'Donnell took a deep breath and held it longer than seemed humanly possible. Then he exhaled, gently. It was an old habit. Tell me what words you've tried so far, he said. Neagley opened her notebook to the relevant page and handed it over. O'Donnell put a finger to his lips and read. Reacher watched him. He hadn't seen him in 11 years, but he hadn't changed much. He had the kind of corn-colored hair that would never show gray. He had the kind of greyhound's body that would never show fat. His suit was beautifully cut. In the same way as Neagley, he looked settled and prosperous and successful. Like he was making it. Koufax didn't work? He asked. Neagley shook her head. That was our third try. Should have been your first, out of this list. Franz related to icons, gods, people he admired, performances he idolized. Koufax is the only one of these that really fits the bill. The others are merely sentimental. Miles Davis perhaps, because he loved music, but ultimately he thought music was inessential. Music is inessential and baseball isn't. Baseball is a metaphor, O'Donnell said. An ace pitcher like Sandy Koufax, a man of great integrity, all alone on the mound, the World Series, stakes high. That's how Franz wanted to see himself. He probably wouldn't have articulated it exactly that way, but I can tell you his password would have to be a worthy repository for his devotion. And it would be expressed in a brusque, masculine fashion, which would mean a surname only. So what would you vote for? It's tough, with only one try left. I'd look like a real fool if I were wrong. What are we going to find on there anyway? Something he felt was worth hiding. Reacher said, something he got his legs broken for. He didn't give up anything. He drove them into a fury. His office looks like a tornado hit it. What's our ultimate aim here? Seek and destroy. Is that good enough for you? O'Donnell shook his head. No, he said. I want to kill their families and piss on their ancestors' graves. You haven't changed. I've gotten worse. Have you changed? If I have, I'm ready to change back. O'Donnell smiled, briefly. Neagly, what don't you do? Neagly said, you don't mess with the special investigators. Correct, O'Donnell said. You do not. Can we get some room service coffee? They drank thick, strong coffee out of the kind of battered electroplated jugs found only in old hotels. They kept pretty quiet, but each of them knew the others were tracing the same mental circles, shying away from the last attempt at the password, examining the vector, trying to find another avenue forward, failing to, and starting all over again. Finally O'Donnell put his cup down and said, time to shit or get off the pot. Or fish or cut bait. Or however else you want to express it. Let's hear your ideas. Neagly said, I don't have any. Reacher said, you do it, Dave. You've got something in mind. I can tell. Do you trust me? As far as I could throw you. Which would be pretty damn far, as skinny as you are. Exactly how far, you'll find out if you screw up. O'Donnell got out of his chair and flexed his fingers and stepped over to the laptop on the desk. Put the cursor in the box on the screen and typed 7 letters. Took a breath and held it. Paused. Waited. Hit enter. The laptop screen redrew. A file directory appeared. A table of contents. Big, bold, clear and obvious. O'Donnell breathed out. He had typed, Reacher. 18. Reacher spun away from the computer like he had been slapped and said, man, that ain't fair. He liked you, O'Donnell said. He admired you. It's like a voice from the grave. Like a call. You were here anyway. It doubles everything. Now I can't let him down. You weren't going to in the first place. Too much pressure. No such thing as too much pressure. We like pressure. We thrive on pressure. Neagly was at the desk, fingers on the laptop's keyboard, staring at the screen. 8 separate files, she said. 7 of them are a bunch of numbers and the 8th is a list of names. Show me the names, O'Donnell said. Neagly clicked on an icon and a word processor page opened. It contained a vertical list of 5 names. At the top, typed in bold and underlined, was Azari Mahmood. Then came 4 Western names, Adrian Mount, Alan Mason, Andrew McBride, and Anthony Matthews. Initials are all the same, O'Donnell said. Top 1 is Arab, anywhere from Morocco to Pakistan. Syrian, Neagly said. That would be my guess. Last 4 names feel British, Reacher said. Don't you think? Rather than American? English or Scottish? Significance? O'Donnell asked. Reacher said, at first glance I would say one of Franz's background checks came up with a Syrian guy with 4 known aliases. Because of the 5 sets of common initials. Clumsy, but indicative. Maybe he's got monogrammed shirts. And maybe the phony names are British because the paperwork is British, which would get around the kind of scrutiny that American paperwork would invite over here. Possible, O'Donnell said. Reacher said, show me the numbers. Neagly closed the word processor document and opened the first of 7 spreadsheets. It was nothing more than a page-long vertical list of fractions. At the top was 10/12. At the bottom was 11/12. In between were 20-some similar numbers, including a repeated 10/12 and a 12/13 and a 9/10. Next, Reacher said. The next spreadsheet was essentially identical. A long vertical column, starting with 13/14 and ending with 8/9. 20-some similar numbers in between. Next, Reacher said. The third spreadsheet showed more or less exactly the same thing. Are they dates? O'Donnell said. No, Reacher said. 13/14 isn't a date whether it's month day or day month. So what are they? Just fractions? Not really. 10 over 12 would be written 5 over 6 if it was a regular fraction. They're like box scores, then. For the game from hell. 13 for 14 and 12 for 13 would imply lots of extra innings and a 3-figure final score, probably. So what are they? Show me the next one. The fourth spreadsheet showed the same long vertical list of fractions. The denominators were pretty much the same as in the first three, 12s and 10s and 13s. But the numerators were generally smaller. There was a 9/12ths and an 8/13ths. Even a 5/14ths. O'Donnell said, if these are box scores, someone's slumping. Next, Reacher said. The trend continued. The fifth sheet had a 3/12ths and a 4/13ths. The best was a 6/11ths. Someone's heading back to the minor leagues, O'Donnell said. The sixth list had 5/13ths as its best score and 3/13ths as its worst. The seventh and last was about the same, varying between 4/11ths and 3/12ths. Neagley looked up at Reacher and said, you figure it out. You're the numbers guy. And Franz addressed all of this to you, after all. I was his password, Reacher said. That's all. He didn't address anything to anyone. These aren't messages. He'd have made it clearer if he was trying to communicate. These are working notes. Very cryptic working notes. Can you print them out for me? I can't think without seeing them on paper. I can print them in the business center downstairs. That's why I stay in places like this now. O'Donnell asked, why would they trash an office to look for a list of numbers? Maybe they didn't, Reacher said. Maybe they were looking for the list of names. Neagley shut down the spreadsheets and reopened the word processor document. Azari Mahmood, Adrian Mount, Alan Mason, Andrew McBride, Anthony Matthews. So who is this guy? Reacher said. 3 time zones away in New York City it was 3 hours later in the day and the dark-haired 40-year-old man who could have been Indian, or Pakistani, or Iranian, or Syrian, or Lebanese, or Algerian, or Israeli, or Italian was crouching on a bathroom floor inside an expensive Madison Avenue hotel room. The door was closed. There was no smoke detector in the bathroom, but there was an extractor fan. The British passport issued to Adrian Mount was burning in the toilet pan. As always, the inside pages went up easily. The stiff red covers burned slower. Page 31 was the laminated ID page. It burned slowest of all. The plastic curled and twisted and melted. The man used the hairdryer from the bathroom wall at a distance to fan the flames. Then he used the butt end of his toothbrush to stir the ashes and the unburned flakes of paper. He lit another match and went after anything that was still recognizable. 5 minutes later, Adrian Mount was flushed away and Alan Mason was on his way down to the street in the elevator.